Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
My guest today is Sara Larsen, the CMO of Brightcove, which is a $165 million company based in Boston, 490 employees or so. And it's a cloud-based video platform. Perhaps you've heard of them. And what I'm really excited about is that Sara is my first guest from Fargo, North Dakota. So Sara, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. And thank you for calling out Fargo, North Dakota.
Yeah, let's talk about Fargo. I mean, first of all, did you sort of ever imagine growing up in Fargo that you'd sort of be on this podcast here living in Boston?
No, I didn't know where I'd end up.
So, but you don't sound like Frances McDermott. I'm waiting for a little bit of the Fargo to come out. Does it?
Sometimes it does. I haven't lived in Fargo for many years. However, the second I land at the Fargo International Airport, the accent comes right back.
Yeah. And so what are your sort of, if we were looking for it, what are those key sort of Fargoisms?
The Fargoisms, O for sure. O for nice. Everything is O for, and it's almost a little bit of a Canadian accent.
Yeah.
North Dakota is bordered on Canada, and so there's a little bit of a Canadian accent.
All right, so
I will tell you, you will not find nicer people than in Fargo, North Dakota.
There you go. And have you watched the TV show?
I've seen the TV show, I've seen the movie, and I will just jump to the punchline. I do not own a wood chipper.
Well, I wasn't going to ask about that, but one of my favorite stories is my son said, you got to watch the TV show. It's great. And my wife doesn't really like violence. And he said, oh, it's not that violent, Mom. And of course, it's brutally violent, right, just for anybody who hasn't seen it. But, so that was when my son lost his ability to be a picker of shows for my wife, but that's all cool. Okay, so since you left Fargo, you've had an amazing career. I mean, you worked a couple years at Accenture, 6 years at IBM, 8 years at SAP, 4 years at Dassault, all these big companies. And I'm curious, and I think a lot of folks that aspire to be CMO sort of wonder about career management. Talk a little bit about the building blocks of your career and maybe one or two things that you learned along the way or from some of these experiences.
Well, a couple of things, and you're right. I have been so lucky, and I'm very grateful to the career that I've had to work with some really amazing companies and some really great people. I've learned so much along the way in terms of some wonderful mentors and some great bosses and wonderful teams. And I think that as I've gone from sort of place to place, and even now here at Brightcove, everyone is facing the same types of problems. How you can solve them becomes a little bit different depending on the environment you're in, if you're in a multinational or if you're in a smaller company or a startup. But the problems that people are having in business today and the opportunity that people have, there's a commonality in the thread around really quickly changing customer expectations. Even if you think about a decade ago to today, how quickly customer expectations are changing, whether you're in retail or whether you're in any type of commerce or any type of building of products or solutions or services, those expectations are changing very quickly. How companies can solve them becomes a little bit different. And marketing is that change agent within an organization that is understanding that probably first and has had to carry a lot of the water within most organizations on helping to drive the change internally to meet some of those customer expectations.
It's funny. I was doing some research for a speech I was writing actually for someone else, and one of the things that was so interesting is this sort of shift with particularly Gen Z and to some extent millennials in their sort of, they don't aspire to own cars. Mm-hmm. They almost everything that they've experienced from whether audio, music, video, all of it is just sort of ephemeral. It doesn't have any sort of physical being. They live in a virtual world, and all of those things change what marketers need to do because it becomes, it's all experience. It's not about possession.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
such an
And
interesting
it
time.
really is about the experience. If you think of any product or service in your life, your lens now starts to look at the experience around that product or service. And I think that's something we didn't think about a decade or 2 decades ago. You really thought about what's the best product I can get, but the service around it is really, and the overall experience around it is what matters
Well,
now.
and
And so that's a huge change.
oh, it is. And it's funny because we work with a lot of software companies, and their goal from a business perception standpoint, particularly if they're VC funded, is to be about, it's about getting the software, not about the service, but it's the service that creates the experience as much as
Right.
the product does. And so it's sort of one of these kind of things where I look and go, wait a second, guys, this service is your secret weapon. I don't care how
Right.
great your software is, because that's the experience.
Right.
And
Well,
I'm going to
I'll give you a little mind. I'll give you a mind meld on that. Is the service is the software is the service. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you have to deliver an experience. I've spent a lot of time on that topic. Obviously, here at Brightcove, when we think about the video experience, but in my previous roles, as you were taking sort of companies that had a really great product, whether it was in ERP and payroll and data and analytics, design software, and figuring out how does that become much more of an experience. When you think about how we do our jobs today, we don't do just one piece of our job. We have to have data and information across an organization to be able to do a job. Someone who's designing a product, they can't just design it in a vacuum. They need to understand a lot about what's happening across the organization. How will it be marketed and sold? How will it be manufactured? What's that total experience look like? And so how we do our jobs is different. And I think that the marketing function in organizations, and I've seen it in a few larger companies, and I see it here at Brightcove, really leads that discussion. They understand what those customer changing requirements are. They understand what those people need, and they help to try and within the organization drive that change management, whether it's within marketing or across other parts of the business. For example, I work really closely with product. I work really closely with sales, and those are the key customer touch points.
So let's, if you think about the various experiences you have, is there one sort of renegade accomplishment that you would say, God, that was a renegade moment for me at one of your earlier firms? You look back and say, we killed it on this one.
A renegade moment. I'll tell you, it's a little bit of a personal moment, and it probably harkens back to some of my experience of coming from North Dakota. When I started at IBM, I had a really interesting job, and it was to help the various countries and regions in IBM had built their own commerce platforms. And this is back when IBM was the e-commerce company. Well, they weren't even running their own product. They were running these sort of homegrown or external products. So I had to go across the world and help these countries move from their sort of homegrown e-commerce solution to the corporate solution. So here I'm like charging in from corporate Armonk to tell these countries that they needed to move on to a new solution. And I had an opportunity to visit Tokyo and Japan for the first time, and to really understand, especially as a younger manager within IBM, as a woman, within the organization, how to navigate that culture. So that was a big cultural moment. So migrating IBM Japan onto the corporate solution was probably one of my accomplishments. In the scheme of IBM, it probably wasn't a big deal, but for me, it was a huge learning.
Sure.
Just how do you navigate a different culture? How do you communicate? Why is a change important? And how do you get people through that change?
It's amazing the various things that a marketing job can take you into and the challenges. I'm wondering if you had any mentors along the way that were particularly instructive that you could share.
Oh, I've had so many great mentors, and I couldn't even start to name them all. A lot of advice. I'll tell you again. This was another great IBM story, and I was early in my career, and I had a great idea for a project. And I walked in. I had this fantastic presentation. I had the business case. I had beautiful charts, and I walk in to a general manager at IBM, which is kind of a senior role, and I said, I have this idea, and I need a little bit of money to do it. General manager says, not a problem. No problem. I said, great. He said, at IBM, and this is true of many large companies, money isn't your problem. I said, oh, well, great. So you're going to give me the money? No, I'm not going to give you the money. So now I'm really confused because I've been told money's not a problem. I have this great presentation. And he helped me understand we don't understand the priority of that project. So it's not the money that becomes a problem. It's how do you prioritize something? That really, again, talks to how do you tie what you're trying to do? And marketing, I think, is really, really tied into this. How are you trying to, tether what you're trying to do to a business priority, to a customer need, to something that's relevant to the organization? So you can have tons of great ideas, and there could be a lot of money, but if you don't put together the priority really well, it doesn't happen. And so that was a really big learning. So I went off, and then I had to research what are our priorities and how do I position this, and eventually went back and was able to get that program funded. But that really taught me at an early age that money is in budget, which marketing, really that's our bread and butter, is we're a cost center in most organizations. And we really have to manage our priorities and get our budget aligned to the organizational priorities.
I think that's such an interesting story. I thought it was going to go someplace else. And because so often the lessons that marketers learn is that ideas are hard to sell. And the reason they're hard to sell is not just priority, but it's also ownership and the notion that you have this idea. I thought, where your boss was going to say, this isn't, it's not his idea, and all ideas need to be shared across the organization, and they have a sense of group ownership. And I think that's sort of what priority really is that you're aligning this idea with something that is a bigger and therefore, fits into a broader scheme of things. I think that's one big challenge, and one lesson that I have for a lot of CMOs, and this came up in 2 interviews I remember in particular. I think one was David Edelman of Aetna, and he walked in and he was pretty sure he knew what the idea was, and he stopped before he pushed too far because he realized the process mattered, getting people along the way, bringing everybody with them. And it wasn't about him being right or wrong. It was about organizations sort of realigning, as you said, against certain new priorities. And you can't do that by simply saying, here it is. It's really quite a methodical process. And I think people underestimate that great CMOs are great leaders, and leadership involves not telling us, hey, there's the hill and take it, because this isn't the war. This is something very different. This is getting humans to align against a common purpose. So enough preaching on that from me. I think it's a perfect place to take a break. And when we come back, let's talk about the marketing challenges that you're facing at Brightcove. So we'll be right back.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
Okay, we're back. And my guest is Sara Larsen, CMO at Brightcove. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, Brightcove is a cloud-based video platform. And I'm really curious, let's just start with when you arrived roughly 10 months ago, what did you see as your top priorities?
Well, one of the top priorities that I have and the leadership team has here at Brightcove is to really continue to build a breakout growth model for video. And that includes both for us in terms of how we're growing as a company, but also growing video as a category and a way people are engaging in the world. And that could be how marketers are engaging, how companies are engaging their people to communicate, and how media organizations and really any content organization is reaching people. And so thinking through that, what does that mean internally? How do we organize our priorities? Where do we put emphasis? What potentially do we de-emphasize? Because you can't do it all. Centered around that goal of really bringing video to the forefront in the industry.
Okay, that's one, and I want to pause on that. Well, because it's really interesting. Because a lot of companies have to decide: are we growing? Are we just getting? Is this a share grab or is this a category growth thing? And obviously, if you're the leader, traditionally speaking, you always have to grow the category. And so,
Right.
I'm presuming that this comes from a position of leadership.
Mhm.
And so, but growing a category is not as easy as it sounds. I mean, Kodak was the leader in film, and they couldn't really do much to grow that category after a while. So, what kinds of things, as you look at that, how does that manifest itself? I mean, what kinds of things we say strategically? All right, we're going to grow the category by doing what?
So when you think about the category, that's a really interesting comment about Polaroid that owned the category. Well, the category shifted, right? People are still wildly engaged in visual content and in the moment photos and collection of memories through some sort of, video or photo capture. And so if you think about the category shifted, the video category is expanding and shifting. When you think about how do people consume content today? On their phones, on the go, on their time schedule. If you think about, how about yourself? Do you ever sit down and say, I have to sit in front of the TV at 8 o'clock tonight because that program is on?
Never happens.
Right.
Never.
So your sort of linear, non-linear viewing habits have changed significantly. And so that goes back to those changing customer expectations. So if you look at how are people consuming video, an analogy to Polaroid, how are people consuming photos? There are probably more photos taken on any given day today than, in a year, 10 years ago, right? And so the category is expanding, but it's expanding in a different way. And so I think our job as a category leader is to understand those shifts and to help our customers through that shift. So if you're a media company and you're a very traditional media company, or you're a publisher, how do you start to use video because your viewers aren't coming to a pre-scheduled program? They're not coming to a static web page to read content. They might not be buying a newspaper. I love the story we had recently at our customer conference play last month in Boston. We had the head of media for Le Figaro, which is a very large media organization, one of the oldest media organizations in France. And he talked about how he was trying to figure out, how do we engage our audience in a new way? He was watching his teenage son, on Twitch, and how his son was engaged in this game and watching people and commenting. And he said, news is like that. It's not a static thing. Things are happening. And so they've launched now a variety of live channels, and they encourage audience participation on those live channels so that they'll follow an election through a live stream, or they'll follow an event through a live stream and have online commenting. And so that's an idea of how you take a very traditional category of news and content, which had been, one-way delivery, static format, and it becomes a live event that the publisher is now hosting. And so helping various people in different parts of the industry figure out what are those customer expectations, how can they get ahead of that curve. That's really what our job is at Brightcove in the video category.
So really having to educate and bring them along in order to sort of help them in their business. That tremendous sense. I'm wondering, is there a clear why for Brightcove? I mean, would you consider yourself a purpose-driven organization?
So when we think about our purpose, we think our purpose is to help our customers bring their stories to the eyes of the world. And we do that through new ways. So we're continuously developing new technology for how to do that in live scenarios and social scenarios, in all kinds of apps, whatever the newest format you need to bring content forward. We do that with an experience that is consistent with a high degree of quality and trusted level of support and security. But I think the piece that is becoming more and more relevant is how we can help our customers understand how video is working. So what are the analytics around it? What matters? What are the comparative analytics around, I might have had a great video experience, was it better than someone else's? That piece, I think, is what we're getting asked a lot about now, because people understand the category, they understand they need to be in it, but they want to understand their relative success in it as well.
Interesting. And so a purpose of being helping your clients bring stories to the world is an interesting. There's a lot of powerful words in there. If we break that down, first my question is: do you think you all are drinking your own champagne? Are you best of class when it comes to using video to market Brightcove?
I think we have a little ways to go. I think you could probably talk to any CMO and they would probably tell you that we need to drink more of our champagne. I would love to be drunk on Brightcove. How about that?
Well, it's funny
and
because, this is what's funny is in the marketing automation world, traditionally, whether it's HubSpot or Eloqua or Demandbase and ABM or Marketo, they were all really good. In fact, better than anybody else at using their own platform to sell their platform.
Yes.
But I think it's a mentality that they bring, and it's one that, a lot of companies that don't get there, and you're so busy servicing your clients that you forget, wait, okay, one of the best ways we could show them how to do it is be our best case history. Okay,
yes.
so there's room to grow there.
There's
okay.
always room to grow there.
All right. So we have this stories to the eyes of the world, which is your way of building the category. What are there some specific initiatives that you started that have happened or under your watch that you're thinking, that is moving us in the right direction?
Well, one of the things that we did recently, and it's a little bit back to drinking your own champagne, was our customer conference. So we reinvigorated our customer conference this year, Play, which happened last month in Boston. And there were a couple of objectives I threw out to the team. I said, one, let's have more customers than we've ever had at this conference. So this isn't a conference about us. It's about us hosting a conversation on video. And the best way we can have that conversation are with the people that are using it today in really, really unique ways. And so we had more customers than we've ever had at our Play conference, speaking on main stage and breakouts and practitioner sessions, in workshops, and we got tremendous feedback from attendees on that. The second piece I threw out was, let's have more video at our video conference than ever before. And so we did that. We live streamed. We actually used our new live to social capability, had some great social engagement online. We were able to capture a lot of real-time video on site, and really started to think about how do we take an on-site experience, make it a live experience, but also build a video component to it. And so that is now available online in our, we call it replay, which is you can basically attend Play and see all of the replays, and we've packaged that into a way that you can sort of capture a lot of information from the Play event. And so that was one way where we wanted to bring the customer dimension and our own product together in a little bit more of a unique way. And I think that stretched the team a little bit, because they said, I have to get out of my silo and I need to sort of think a little bit broader. And so that was a good example. Interesting.
And I love that for any number of reasons. In my conversation with Ann Lunas of Adobe, we talked about her surprise, how effective, first of all, how much money they were spending at Adobe on events, and then ultimately come to realize how valuable they were. And it's funny, as even in your business, as you want people to consume more videos, which tend to be passive, from a marketing standpoint, human interactions are even more important than ever. And I emphasize this a lot on the show because there is such a lot of pressure on CMOs to spend money on digital, which feels like something cool and new and different and measurable and all those good things, but it's not the same. And so I just like putting a punctuation point on events, particularly user conferences, because if users don't come to your conference, you have a product and service problem. But if they do come and they rally around you, man, does that create a lot of opportunities. And
I'd say a couple things, I'd advise marketers and CMOs around events, because there's always that debate, like how much should you spend on an event? And you're sitting with the CFO and you're debating line items every year. If you purely look at events, especially the company event, the customer event, on purely a pipeline ROI number, you're missing the boat. You need to do that. And I do think that these events need to be viewed through the lens of a business meeting. Absolutely. However, they become very large change events for the organization, internally and externally. And so again, back to the role of a CMO as the change agent in an organization, use that investment very strategically to help you change the mindset. So for example, I talked about how we wanted to change the mindset to be a more customer-centric and more of a video-led organization ourselves. The other objective we had, which was to grow our ecosystem and attract a set of sponsors that really start to build out the ecosystem in the industry. That was something we accomplished at the event. So use the event and that investment to, yes, deliver on support for sales and deliver on pipeline and help with those business metrics, but also think about what are the change and the change management metrics that you are putting forth around the event, and call those out to the executive leadership team so they can see how a 2 or 3 day event, which takes many, many months to prepare, actually changes the mindset and changes the direction of the organization.
Very cool. Perfect place to take a break. We'll be right back.
Did you know that Renegade Thinkers Unite was ranked number 2 of the top 10 podcasts for CMOs by Crackerjack Marketing? Wow, we're really honored. Now, we couldn't do that without amazing guests, and we've had some amazing CMOs on this show, and also terrific listeners like you all. If you like what we do here, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Also, as a special thanks, I'd like to send you a free ebook on Renegade Thinkers. Now, for that, just email drew@renegade.com. Now let's get back to the show.
Okay, so my guest is Sara Larsen, CMO of Brightcove, and we've been talking about power of events, particularly customer events, and looking at different ways of measuring those so you don't simply look at it as how much are we spending on this relative to, wait, aren't they customers already? One of the things that also I think is cool about events, and is a big emphasis and will be a big emphasis in my next book, is the importance of employees in all of this. And events are a fantastic place to get employees reinvigorated about the brand. And it sounds like that happened at Play.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I think this is a really interesting question. I was actually with a group of CMOs the other night for dinner, and this came up of what is the role of the CMO today in that internal communications, that employee engagement, employee communications function. A lot of times it's been sitting in HR, and it might make sense. However, when you think about what CMOs are doing today, which is understanding the customer, understanding how to translate those new expectations, understand how to drive some change management within the organization, you're increasingly seeing CMOs being asked to take on this internal communications or employee communications role. So it was very consistent across the group and they were all women. So it was a women's empowerment CMO group. And so it was very consistent across the group that we're all sort of being asked to take that on, because the change management piece, again, is sort of finding its way into the marketing function.
Well, I think it's funny, and I've been tracking, obviously, CMOs and all the things that they've been asked to do. I mean, it gets ridiculous because some are put in charge of customer experience, and which often extends into support. And so it's a fine line between suddenly you're doing everything but finance, and it can become a very difficult and almost unmanageable role. However, when it comes to employees, particularly today when you're at and in tech, where you have an incredibly low unemployment rate, there's lots of opportunities for companies, for employees to find work, and particularly, and the better they are, the more opportunities they are. So a employee brand, if you will, or the brand of the company is increasingly important. And the only person in my mind that can drive the vision for that, they don't necessarily have to execute, but drive the vision is the CMO. And I'm going to punctuate this by saying this is why I think purpose is so important. And being able to express the purpose to employees, to customers, and to prospects in that order is essential.
Absolutely.
And so it I know where the conversations are happening. What I'm not seeing though is I'll often talk to a CMO. This is off the record, and they'll say, "Oh well, HR's been there forever," and they say, "Hey, I got this. Leave me alone." And even trying to implement, say, for example, ESAT, an employee satisfaction study that you can use as a benchmark as you roll out a new brand can be difficult. And so I'm wondering, and so what, in fact, one CMO said to me is, first thing I did was make HR their best friend.
Yeah, you're right.
You don't want their job.
No.
You just want to help them communicate better and let them realize that brand and the essence of the brand, which is purpose, will help them make for a better culture. And culture equals ultimately better marketing. And it's sort of, it's not that complicated. So then if you can avoid the turf war and you can sort of say, hey, we're with you. I'm with you. I don't want your job. I just want to get alignment.
Yeah, and I think you're fine. I mean, I've found, at least in my last couple of positions, HR is like at my door knocking, saying, please help, especially when we think about becoming that employer of choice, because they realize there's only so far you can go on salary and benefits and these things, because things are becoming much more competitive. And employees join companies because they believe in the brand, they believe in the purpose, and they understand when they talk to people, people understand that internally. And so that's a big piece about communication. And HR can't do it alone. The last few HR leaders I've worked with have said, I can't do it alone, help me. Right. And so it's definitely a partnership, because a brand is successful externally if it's successful internally. Yeah. You will not find on that list of top 25 or top 50 brands companies that don't have a massively strong internal brand and internal communications.
It's really true.
I mean, if you lined up, I think Amazon is now the number one most valued brand in the world. If you lined up 10 Amazon employees, they could tell you what that brand means.
Oh, yes, they could.
And that doesn't happen magically. That's work, and that's a lot of partnership between marketing, communications, and the HR teams to make that happen.
So we've talked about your top priority of growing the category and doing that by sort of showing by example how video can really make a difference. I'm wondering, and then we talked about the play and how you sort of invigorated that for both employees and customers, and how you framed it so that the management could see the value of this beyond simply increasing revenue per customer. So is there any other thing, as in your first 10 months, that's a lot, but that you would sort of like to say, hey, I'm really proud of what we were able to do here from a marketing standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that I'm proud of is we were able to bring into the organization one of our largest competitors. And so we acquired Ooyala, which was very, very much a very similar technology to Brightcove. It was a big competitor in the marketplace. And we've been able to seamlessly bring Ooyala and their customers into Brightcove. We're in the process of communicating with them right now on our roadmap. And as we've brought employees in, we've had a really great response from those employees. And so that's a little bit of inside baseball, because it's not, wildly visible externally. But that was a big moment for Brightcove, because Ooyala had been a long-term competitor. Brightcove and Ooyala sort of started in the industry around the same time, and so it's given a little bit of push and a little bit of wind behind our backs to say, okay, we are the category leader, and now their responsibilities as a result of that. And so we've been, sort of digesting that acquisition over the past few months. And I think as we go into the second half of this year, we're spending a lot of time now on how can we be thoughtful about this? How do we continue to help our customers understand where video is going, and taking a little bit more of that category thought leadership role?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I'm curious, from a branding standpoint, are you a branded house? I mean, does that brand go away, the one that you acquired?
Yes, the brand goes away. In terms of what we're doing is we're bringing in some of the best parts of that platform that we acquired, and we're integrating it into the Brightcove platform. So we have overall a much stronger offer for our
Right.
customers.
And was there any hesitation at all from in the organization in terms of the brand name? Obviously, you I can't even say their name, had
There you go.
loyal.
That's
Yeah,
why.
right. Well, that makes it a lot easier. Yeah. But they had equity in it. And were there anybody who was saying, wait, we acquired this company, we're going to, lose our customers because suddenly they're going to, but versus the benefit of having a single brand and a dominant brand like you have now?
Well, we've talked to customers, and I think from a customer perspective, and that's really where you answer those types of questions first, right? What's the customer understanding and expectation? Customers wanted to understand, and this is a great advice for anyone working on any acquisitions. Talk to your customers about, does it matter? Does the name matter? And what we heard is they're really interested in knowing, where's the technology going? What's the support and service level? Because there's some very big differences between support and services between the two organizations. And how will you help me with my business? And that's really what mattered. And so they understood that coming from Brightcove. And so the equity piece around a name wasn't as relevant as, are we able to communicate value to those customers? And we've been successful with that.
Yeah, and I have a client CEO that I want you to call on my behalf, because I think it's important that he heard exactly what you said. But I agree that in most cases, when you acquire, the loyalty isn't to the name. The loyalty is to the purpose and maybe to the individuals. But not necessarily to the name. And the benefits of having one big brand, particularly in a marketplace like yours, or in most markets, are huge. I mean, I can't overemphasize this. I mean, because you have economies of scale, you're building one brand, and all that thought leadership and equity you can pump into it. It helps from employees, it helps from customers, and it helps from prospects. So it feels pretty simple.
And it's tricky. And again, we're a little bit smaller organization dealing with this, but if you look at most recently where I was at Dassault Systems, or even SAP, they've been doing a lot of acquisitions. And how do you keep enough of that equity around a particular product or solution? And the people piece is really important, because at the end of the day, you're acquiring these large organizations in some cases, if you're at SAP or an IBM or others, and you're acquiring very large organizations, and people have a badge with the name on it. And there's as we just talked about, they understand that brand. And so you have to go through a process to help them understand, what are they now part of? And if you're not thoughtful on that journey with employees, that can become a challenge as well. So you need to do that with customers, but you also need to do that with the teams that are coming into the organization that you're acquiring.
Yeah, you really make me think about that for a second, because part of this is where brand, culture, purpose, all these things intersect. If you're the acquiring company, and there's a general attitude of positivity towards the company, it's a lot easier. If you're the evil empire, people are going to take their money from their stock options and run, because the reputation is such. I think that's so. It's one of those things that I think acquisitive companies don't always think about, that their brand matters. And I know IBM's been really good at this. Cisco's been really good at this. I mean, they have acculturation teams that are ready to bring people along. They've thought it through. What is our company? What are the values? And then they continue to pump equity into the master brand, the parent brand, so that the people who've been acquired feel like they're part of something big and good.
Right. And they understand why they're part of it. I mean, that's the big piece of the why. You can get a lot of the basics down. Okay, what's the new benefits package? What's the comp mod? All of those things. But why am I here? Because at the end of the day, as I tell, my team, there is not a lock on the door. We are not locking you into the building. You choose to come here every day. And we want people to continue to know why they're choosing to come. And so that's a big piece of it, is helping people understand what they're part of.
Well, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I know that my listeners have a relatively short commute. And so we do have to wrap this up, but I'm wondering if you could, for your fellow CMOs, offer, based on the experience that you've had at Brightcove, 2 do's and a don't.
Oh, 2 do's and a don't. Wow, this is putting me on the spot. 2 do's and a don't. Well, do listen. That's probably listen before you speak. So I've spent a lot of time listening in my 10 months here because there's a lot to soak in. Do be very clear about what you're trying to accomplish. I think clarity of what are you trying to get done and why, the why behind it. And don't be late to meetings with the CEO. It was probably one of my worst moments when I was a little bit late to a meeting with the CEO. So
Row. Yeah.
I got called out. I had the whole executive team texting me, "Where are you?"
Yeah, no, that's, I don't know. I'm pretty sure my son's not listening, but yeah, generally, don't be late. And it's funny, early in my career, I think someone said, if you're late to a client meeting, don't apologize, because if you wanted to be there on time, you would have been. One way or another, you would have planned. So don't apologize, no matter what happens. Just charge forward and take your medicine. All right. Well,
I will say one other thing that just came to me is I've spent a lot of time on this, sort of coming into the CMO role, and a lot of stuff gets thrown at you. You mentioned that the CMO role, it's sort of like everything in the kitchen sink comes at you. And I would say, don't feel like you have to react to it immediately. I use this phrase with my team a lot, the answer will appear. And I do believe that sometimes you just have to let things sit a little bit. And I'm not the most patient person, so it's been a lesson that's been hard for me to learn, but sometimes you just have to let the answer appear.
Let it, let that sauce just sort of meld a little bit. Interesting. I love that advice. Love that advice. All right. I'm going to attempt to do an instant summary of our conversation, which I can't do because I thought it was so interesting. We covered a lot of ground. We talked about career and career management and how you pick up things along the way. We did not really get into a very good North Dakota accent yet. I'm a little disappointed by that, but I'm sure there's a chance for recovery in your response. We talked a lot about customer experience and bringing something fresh to these experiences and why they're so important. We talked about drinking your own champagne and how, particularly for software companies like that, and so that's on your list. So we look forward to seeing how Brightcove proves things out. One of the things we didn't talk about is story, and let me tell you why. I do believe it's important. I've talked about it at length. I do believe it's also the most overused and least understood of art form in the world. I recognize its importance, and I know how hard it is. And God bless all of you out there who are students of storytelling, because I can't encourage you to do it enough. So before you use that word, not you, but listeners, there's a wonderful, great course on storytelling. It's one of my favorite. I try to listen to it every 6 months. She's a professional storyteller, and she talks about storytelling through story. And I love that. And so that may be my parting gift to you all. We'll include a link to that great course in the show notes. So, and her name is Hannah, by the way. I know that, and I can't remember her last name. Anyway, that's it's been amazing talking to you. I've really enjoyed this.
As have I.
Thank you to all of you folks who were kind enough to listen all the way through. Thank you as always. I wanted to let you know that you can always send me an email, drew@renegade.com. We're very prompt. We have, I think we mentioned in one of our videos, we have one of our commercial breaks. We have a new ebook that we just put out that's kind of cool just for listeners. And until next week, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.